Oh, Blippy boy. Oh, here we go. Atheist Blippy.
Hi, guys. Hi. It's Joel Reads Bible. Hi, kids.
I'm alone.
Hi, guys. I'm alone. I don't want to be alone.
All right. He's talking about the moral argument, right? William Lane Craig. You guys remember? William Lane Craig, who's a blasphemous heretic, presents some arguments. He actually demolished Sam Harris, but it had nothing to do with the proper Christian doctrine. It had to do with Sam Harris's broken position.
Independent.
So he brings up this argument, which Joel
reads Bible. Hi. Hi, guys. Oh, would you like to see a moral argument? It's just me in my apartment, alone with you. Do I have a family? Not in sight.
So premise one is, if God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. If God exists, or if a God exists, objective morals don't necessarily exist, because this God might be indifferent or malevolent. Like, just imagine the creators of Grand Theft Auto. None of them are looking at the players going like, let me set a moral standard for these non-playable characters.
Now, you see his mistake already. These people are just not good thinkers. I got to take this hat's bothering me. They're not good thinkers. What does it mean to be malevolent? The worst word. Malevolent. Benevolent. Stupid is a word. Anyway, to be really bad, to be evil. He's like, what if God could be evil? Checkmate. Checkmate, Christians. What if God could be evil? Listen, dude. If you already introduced evil, Joel, you've now necessitated the positive good, because you can't define evil unless you have it as the privation of good. So Joel's like, I think I outthought William Lane Craig's argument already. You could just have a really evil guy. No, that requires an absoluteness. That proves William Craig's argument. Joel, you're not a good thinker, Joel.
Characters, or even the playable characters in the game, they're just like, this is how it goes. This guy does that.
What if light could be a shadow? What if the light was the shadow? What if God is the inverted world in Crash Bandicoot?
It's Atheist Blippy.
And they can take the person and do this to them in that car, and they can, do that at that other person, whatever. But they're very indifferent to the goings on in the game. It's just entertainment. Some people subscribe to simulation theory and all the rest of it. There is a chance that if there were a creator God with a mind, they may have made a video game type of experience that we are in and not have any opinion on what people do. And so morality falls to us, and we're the ones that are creating morality for ourselves.
We're creating morality for ourselves, you guys. We're creating morality for ourselves. What is this, James True? What's happening? I'm sorry. How do you, Joel? That itself would make morality, the thing you're referring to as morality. You might even argue that you're arguing objective morality if you're creating morality. Now, I don't know what you're referring to, Joel, when you say morality, when we're creating it like a batch of pancakes. Are we creating morality like a batch of pancakes, Atheist Blippy? Are we also creating truth, Blippy?
And so there could be, conceptually, I don't think this is true, but there could be a God type thing and there not be a moral standard. Why I'm saying all of that is to say that the Christian God, or an all-good God, or a God that cares about morality, or a God that has set the standard, or a God that is the standard, and we'll get into that, all of that is being smuggled in. The idea of God is so vague that I don't think it's fair to smuggle all of that in, right? Because there's so many different gods.
Wow, Joel. Wow. Joel's argument so far is, I don't think it's fair, and we create our own morality. I don't think it's fair because there's a lot of gods. I mean, not a good thinker. Not a good thinker. It's almost like it's almost like they watch these clips or something, and because they already have it in their head, a Christian can't be right. They're not thinking right? So they assume that. And it's almost like they make these videos and they don't quite think alone or with like a friend who's good at philosophy. They don't think through these things. And they don't correct each other. I've mentioned this before with the atheist community. They have a very difficult time correcting each other. They're not rigorous with each other. They're kind of like on each other's side because they're anti-theists. But it stops them from being rigorous with each other. And what you get is a production of talking heads who never get any pushback from their in-group. And this is not the same for Christians. Christians, self-proclaimed Christians, are trying to correct each other all the time. We're bickering. We're debating each other on it. We're trying to debate metaphysics with each other, Christology, church history. We are in it. We are in the trenches of debate constantly. It's always been the case since the beginning of the church. Okay? And the atheists don't do any of it. They don't. And if they were to do it, it would be around social issues. It would be like just like their stance on trans stuff or gay stuff. When it comes to like rigorous philosophy, they just hate each other. They just don't care about how broken their counters are.
And, it's so ill-defined. So basically, because you're talking to a Christian, we can assume they mean the Christian God. That's fine. This is not a moral argument for just any God. This is the moral argument for the Christian God.
Genetic fallacy and personal incredulity fallacy in a few minutes, Joel. Yeah, not a good... Joelina, you're not doing well, man. You're not doing well.
For the Bible God. And I say that because sometimes a Christian will pretend like they're not even attempting to prove their God. But that's fake because it kind of has to be a God with their God's attributes in order for premise one to mean anything. And premise one also fails because objective morals, according to many, many, many philosophers, can exist without a God. There's a lot of, I think they're called moral realists out there.
Oh, gosh. Oh, my gosh, Joel, you're so low tier, dude. You looked up moral realism somewhere, and you're like, I think moral realism... No, the moral realism is a claim. They don't think. Joel thinks in his head... You can ground objective morality because there is a group of people who claim to. You see? See how easy that was? You can have objective moral truths and obligations. I looked up a term called moral realism. So, you guys, I looked up moral realism, and so there is a grounding for objective moral duties and obligations.
There who say that there is objective morality without a...
Did you hear it, guys? There's people out there who say it. Joel? Hey, Joel, did you just hear what you said, buddy? There are people out there who say it. Wow, we're cooking here, Joel. Atheist Blippy is on the rise. Did you hear that argument? Beautiful. I'm going to use that.
Many philosophers can exist without a God. There's a lot of, I think they're called moral realists out there.
There are a lot of philosophers who do believe that morality could exist without a God.
Who say that there is objective morality without a God. I'm not convinced, but apparently they ground their objective morals in life itself. Sometimes I've heard of like an evolutionary grounding. There's also like a logical grounding.
Wow, you've said nothing. They ground it in the world. How? There's a logical grounding, which I won't go over. I'm just going to spew shit without justifying anything I'm saying because I'm Atheist Blippy and I'm on the rise. Here I go. Atheist Blippy. B-L-I-P-P-I. I'm an idiot. Oh my gosh, dude. I wonder what do these people say? I mean, it's just the worst, man. These communities, they're the worst. His criticism is fair because William Lane Craig and other prots do tend to refer to a generic monad type of God. Yeah, well, that's fine. That wouldn't even, but that's still not engaging with the premises. Now, he could clarify and say, well, who is God when we're saying objective morality is not possible without God? It's fair to say, who is God? What are we talking about here? But he's not really, he mentioned that, but that's not even the defeater. That just asks for secondary arguments, which is totally fine. But he's doing much worse than that here. If he ran with that, fine. He'd be like, look, I'm going to engage with this premise in good faith. I need to know who God is in this argument and what is his nature. So if he goes with the triomny, fine. Then you try to run a counter argument. But it's a similar argument to tag, like God is the necessary precondition for knowledge in all of these categories, these transcendental categories. William Lane Craig is running a type of argument saying, well, what he's arguing is God is a necessary being for morality to be objective. If you simply go, well, no, I just don't believe morality is objective, I just think preferences exist, then you have to bite the bullet that the world is just a matter of people competing for force to deploy their subjective preferences. In which case, you couldn't really make an argument against like Christian nationalism, like the worst conception of Christian nationalism, or totalitarianism, or Mean Mr. Mustache Man. They're completely atheist in their pursuits. They're actually consistent with your ethical paradigm, which is collect your preferences, expand them, and then use a gun to enforce them. Okay, cool. We'll compete with you in that game. How about that? His criticism is, okay, yeah. How come every cringe-piled atheist is named Joel? Well, they're born into probably some sort of heterodox or evangelical household, and they're named after. They're often named after people in the Bible as well. So, I find that common for some reason. 9 out of 10 philosophers recommend grounding your do-it-yourself morality in your head. Yeah, how about in a rock?
These are all ways that like professional philosophers and ethicists ground morality without God. So
he doesn't know what ground means. I mean, this is what happens. You launch these people. Joel here is talented in music and singing. He's quite witty with a number of things. I'll give him that. And but what happens, it's interesting. You get launched into this TV world of YouTube, right? It's like the collapse of mainstream media and the rise of all of these alternatives that show up where everyone can have a show, including myself, and they just get thrown in and they just don't even bother to know what they're referring to. They just use terms like grounding. Now, grounding would mean that you're presenting something that's unchanging. It's not movable. Grounded. That's what grounded means, Joel. He thinks grounded means choosing one of the horses on the carousel. That's what grounding means to the atheist. Well, no, I'm just sitting on this horse. Yeah, it's moving and it's going in a circle, and there's a lot of other horses that people are sitting on, but it's grounded in the carousel that's spinning around and changing. That's not what grounded means, bro, dude. Well, they grounded in the trees.
So premise one just isn't true on a couple of levels. But let's just grant it so that we can move forward. If God does not exist, then objective morals do not exist. So premise number 2 is objective moral values do exist. This is where the argument falls apart for me. All you have to do is say, prove that objective moral values do exist.
Yeah, and for you to say prove it, are you making a meta-ethical statement that we ought to be consistent and use proof and logical arguments and consistency, Joel? Why? This is why tag is so fun with these people, because they're out here on the mean streets of debate world, right? Debating people, which assumes there is some teleology, not just deontology, but teleology. If there's a purpose to your brain, Joel, which your worldview doesn't say there is, it's an accidental mechanism that developed from biological processes. No purpose, no direction. And yet here they are, holding space on the internet with their microphones and their cameras and their TikTok invasions and all of this, and they're arguing, oh, we should argue this stuff. Why? Certainly, Joel, you think being on the internet debating and trying to use logic and reasoning to prove points to be accurate or reasonable, to prove positions to be incorrect or correct, you're arguing that we ought to be consistent, that we ought to be logical, that we ought to be rational, that we ought to debate and come to the conclusion, right? Is that the case or no? He's like, prove it. Why prove it? What do you mean? Suddenly there's this ethical position, a duty to prove something? Why?
I don't know how anybody would prove that. First of all, it's a nonsensical phrase. If objective means stance independent, morality is only ever a stance. It has to be a stance. Somebody has to be saying that's wrong.
Close, but not accurate, right? This is where apologists and atheists make a misstep here. Morality wouldn't be a stance, because a stance would be something that's established through experience, new sense data, information, new information, evaluating new information. And here I am, I have a stance now. Now, in a colloquial way, you could say God has a stance, but not in the same way a human would accumulate a stance, like a preference stance or an accumulation of data points to reflect on and go, I don't think this is right. It's not I don't think this is right. The Christian view, Joel, would be that God himself, his very ontology, his very being is good, not his stances. This isn't the Euthyphro dilemma. So he's close in saying, well, you're arguing that a stance must exist. By the way, stance independence is also something I don't even grant, because unless you agree that God doesn't have a stance or something that's mind independent, I don't agree, because that's question begging. You're assuming that the only minds exist are human minds, and then you try to imagine a reality without human minds to declare if any truths exist. Well, that's a problem, because truth is, from that view, conceptual. So if there was a truth that exists without human minds, it would still be mind dependent on some mind. And so this is a problem with approaching morality from the position that it's a stance, it's a view on things. Oh, my morality is a view on the external world. I'm making a view right now. Well, no, the Christian view, Joel, if you were to properly internally critiquing, it wouldn't be a stance. It wouldn't be a set of preferences even from God. It would be God's very nature, his very nature.
Wrong doesn't exist somewhere. Wrong doesn't exist like a tree or gravity or something that like is objectively true. It doesn't.
That's hilarious he said that. Guess what, Joel? I'm trying to be nice so that he could actually see this without just hearing me insult him. No, I do like insulting people. It's fun, but it stops them from seeing what I'm saying. So I'm going to let up. I'm trying to lighten up on it. So listen, douchebag. He just said, well, morality doesn't grow on a tree. That's actually funny because that's my argument. That's what I like to use. You can't step. I borrowed this from Father Deacon Ananias. You can't step in a fact. Joel, you notice how your critique about morality, you can't find it on a tree? You're not applying to truth itself. And he even uses the word truth in the critique. Watch.
Wrong doesn't exist like a tree or gravity or something that like is objectively true. It doesn't.
See that? Isn't it amazing? They are not good thinkers. So morality doesn't exist. It's an immaterial concept that doesn't exist like a tree. It's not out there in nature. It's not true. Dude, how are you missing this, Joel? Truth itself is in the same category. So if you're going to critique morality, say it's not real ultimately. There's nothing real about it. It's totally subjective based on the notion that it's not found in nature. It's not objectively true. Well, the truth itself, laws of logic, Joel, information, knowledge, minds. You don't find a mind in nature, dude. You didn't hold a mind. You didn't weigh a mind. They're so inconsistent with their criteria. That's what the world of atheism is all about, being really inconsistent and special pleading all over the place. Well, I don't believe in anything without evidence. Do you believe that? Well, I see you're playing a word game. No, I'm not.
It exists like the sun. It's an idea. Subjects have ideas, right? So it's dependent on someone's subjective stance by definition.
No, it's not.
So it's kind of a nonsense phrase. I don't know if anyone in the comments can show me how morality is objective somehow. To drive the point home, I'll give you a little bit.
That's why it's a fun argument to investigate the how morality and truth are interlocked. How if you're arguing for morality being objective or subjective, you're in the practice of assuming some sort of direction toward truth. And the question is, should we pursue truth? Like, is there any moral obligation at all from an atheist view to pursue truth? This is where you get them. Because they're, like I said, they're out here on the mean streets of atheist Blippy YouTube trying to pursue the truth. And they're calling us into question, and we should call in and argue with them, right? Why? Why should I abandon Christianity? Why should I abandon false beliefs? Let's say I'm a Muslim. Joel, why should I abandon a false belief? Is it a moral obligation to society to abandon false beliefs, bad beliefs, untrue things? They couldn't say so. Monkey says for $5, unrelated, but this has been on my mind for a while. On the topic of science versus pseudoscience, it's cool if I send you an interesting paper to read. Yeah, I'll probably put it on audio and listen to it. I'm not the best at sitting and reading essays about science. I understand the problem of science and pseudoscience well enough, but sure.
A bit of an analogy. When I was younger, I'm a musician, and I really, really wanted to be able to objectively say that my music was better than other music. I really wanted there to be an objective standard, and I'm not joking.
Cool Boy says, Jimbob, you talk a big game for a guy behind a mic commenting on videos, to be honest. What do you mean talk a big game? What would be the fulfillment of actualizing a big game, Cool Boy? Do I debate people? Yes. Do I schedule debates? Yes. Do I do live debates one-on-one? Yes. Do I let people call in? Yes. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? What's the big game? What's the big game I'm talking about? I don't understand.
Of music, so that we would know what good music was versus poor music or mediocre music or garbage music. And so I could point to something like The Chumbawamba song, I don't even know what it's called, but I get knocked down, but I get up again. And I would say like that's not a good song. Like it's very rude.
I think it's a good song because it's catchy. So it has one element of good because he remembered it. He was able to sing it.
Rudimentary.
Jimbob's so sad. So you don't have a argument, cool boy? 52. Time to party. I asked you, what's playing? If talking a big game is one thing, can I ask you what playing is?
It's really repetitive in a way that's just like not that creative. I don't even know if it's 4 chords. And then if you compare that to Paranoid Android, that's a very complicated song. Like it's a complicated arrangement.
Oh gosh, would you shut up?
There's a lot of different parts to it.
What are you saying? We're not talking about whether you like music or not. We're talking about whether or not anything's immoral. Even if you didn't like a song, Joel, would you skip to, I think the song's immoral? Is Tumbawamba or whatever it's called, I get knocked down, is it immoral because you don't prefer it? When you go to a crappy drive-through and you have a terrible burger, is the burger immoral because you didn't like it? Oh, evil burger. No, evil burger would be a really funny drive-through company. Totally objective and absolute truth is that truth is relative. Now let me tell you a story. Yeah, truth is totally relative. Let me tell you a story. It's amazing. Cool boy says, what do you want to argue? I didn't ask you that question. I asked you, you're accusing me of talking a big game. I asked you, what is playing the game? If I'm just talking the game, I wanted to know from you, what is playing the game?
Totally changes at some point and goes into this cool ending thing. There's all sorts of layered vocals, which are more.
Are you going to counter the premises, Joel? We don't want your Yelp review. I get it. You're a failed musician. You never made it in a band. And here you are doing Atheist Blippy YouTube videos and trying to utilize your music. We get it. Maybe you're going to go on and start a music critique blog, a Substack. No one cares. What does your taste in music have to do at all with the case for morality either being objective or subjective?
More intricate than anything that's going on in the Chumbawamba song. Now, objectively, we can say those types of things about it. Like, objectively, we can say Paranoid Android uses more chords than Chumbawamba.
God, I hate this guy. They always confuse objective with taste. Music is objective, math proven, even microtones. It may not be your taste. Yeah, they're Dustin, exactly. He's describing what music is, and then he's going in and out of doing a value judgment. Oh, well, it's more complex. That's why it's a real song and Chumbawamba's not. No. All of the music itself, octaves are objective. Frequencies of sounds are objective. The math behind music is objective. You can't change the math behind music. Heterodox always elevate simplicity overall. Atheists elevate complexity. That's really interesting. I've heard it said that way. Simplicity, yeah. That's interesting. Huh. What do Muslims do? They go for simplicity too, huh? Unfortunately, not in audiobook form, but I can find... Well, no, you could just copy it, Monkey. Thank you for the extra 5 there. I'll just copy it and have it read to me like I'm a freaking Stephen Hawking.
We can say Paranoid Android has a more intricate and complicated melody than the Chumbawamba song. Paranoid Android has more variety.
Dude, are you kidding me? What is this, a troll? Is this Joel the troll? By the way, let me address William Lane Craig's argument that is a syllogism with two premises and a conclusion. Let me talk about music and show you how much I know about the technical aspect of music. Let me give you a little lesson on music. What is this, Owen Benjamin? What, are you going to do a piano course? More tones are better? Yeah. What if I'm a slow boy? Yeah. What if I just like one tone?
In its arrangement than the Chumbawamba song. Right? Those are objective facts.
That's right.
Like, those are things that are true.
That's
we can
amazing.
just like we can look and count the chords. Like, this is an objective fact. But saying that Paranoid Android is the better song and that the Chumbawamba song is not as good, that's subjective. Even if you say because of all these things, the Paranoid Android is a better song, that's still just your subjective opinion. It's your stance on what makes a song better than another song. There's no objective truth to your stance, to your...
That's a contradiction. There's no objective truth to your stance. It's just amazing. I'm just amazed. I'm flabbergasted. I'm embrangled. I'm starstruck.
or opinion, even
He's literally going in a circle for 5 minutes.
if it's based on things that are objectively true.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
still just a stance. So we can say objectively stabbing someone is harming them, right? Like it definitely physically harms them, and I'm sure mentally, psychologically, it's going to harm them. This is going to be a traumatic experience. And we can measure that objectively. We know that that is causing harm. To have the opinion that it's bad or wrong, that's a subjective opinion. I agree with that opinion. I think that that's true because of all the harm. But I also think that Paranoid Android is a better song.
Oh my gosh, nerd. We objectively want to beat you up. I objectively want to give you a wedgie and throw you in a locker.
Because of all the things that make it, in my mind, a better song. And I
Shut up, nerd. We get it. You like music.
know that these two things
Insufferable.
are not on the same scale as far as importance.
Oh,
it's more
gosh.
valuable and important to have
This
these
is
moral
hell.
conversations
This
than it
is
is
hell.
to talk about which song is better, right? It matters more because it has to do with people's well-being. But again, that's just my opinion, that it matters more than discussing whether or not Chumbawamba sucks. So hopefully that has helped a little bit if you
No.
weren't sure what objective
No, shut up, nerd. It didn't help at all, nerd.
versus subjective means. It's impossible to say that there are objective moral values because they can't be objective. They always have to be, by definition, subjective.
Now, watch. He would argue, this dummy here, Joel, you really are a dumb shit. If you pressed him on his epistemology, he would have to argue that truth itself is based on our subjective experience. That what we say is true has to be based on our interpretation of reality, sense data evaluation. Ultimately, would be subjective, right? This is why truth and morality are intertwined because the standard that you use to reject morality being objective. Watch, I do this argument all the time. It's the same argument that atheists, their denial of God's existence, if you use their standard by which they deny God's existence or fail to believe in God, usually is almost always evidentialism. And you can use that standard to say, well, why do you think truth exists? Why do you think knowledge exists? Why do you think rights exist? Why do you think any of these things exist? If your reason for denying God's existence is pure evidentialism, it's pure empiricism. This is the trap you set. Well, the same trap applies now still. He's rejecting morality. It can't be objective because it's based on our stances. Well, you tell me, without God, Joel, what you know to be absolutely true if you're not ultimately appealing to a collection of subjective experiences of human beings. So he just accepts that truth is objective and it's distinct from morality, even though his methodology, his system, his paradigm couldn't actually tell you how truth is objective. Why would we grant the atheist that truth is objective? Now we're drawn to it because we hold that truth is objective and truth requires God. And we could argue that. Even from a general divine conceptual argument, we can still get to a universal mind by way of an argument. He can't. Atheists can't. There's no atheist in the chat who can actually ground truth itself. You know, he thinks he's got a big winner here as a video looking at morality, but he's so ignorant and naive and arrogant. He doesn't even realize his critique against morality would apply to truth.
Just like it's impossible to say that Paranoid Android is objectively a better song than that unnamed song by Chumbawamba. But there are some evidences that a Christian will use in order to prove that objective moral values do exist. And they're all going to boil down to one thing, but I'm going to give you sort of a run.
Does he have children? No way. If he does, he married young, had children, and realized he was gay.
Down of what those look like. One of the main evidences Christians
Joel did something questionable with a trans, subjectively.
use is they'll point to something horrific, let's say like the Holocaust, and they'll go, that has to be objectively wrong. That has to be, in every world, evil. There can't be a world in which we think that that's okay. So
Really?
it must be that there's an objective moral standard, because if you don't say there's an objective moral standard, then it could be okay that the Holocaust happened. So what they're appealing to there is your intuition. Your intuition will be that Holocausts are wrong. Holocausts are always bad.
I would love to know how Joel here separates intuition from proper evaluation of truth. Because like I said, I'm listening to this and all I'm listening for is any of his arguments against morality being objective obviously is going to lead to a bunch of consequences where everything's okay, by the way. And if everything's okay, lying's okay, cheating's okay, there's no reason to have a justice system other than it's just arbitrarily defined by people and their preferences. He can't argue against Christian nationalism. He can't argue against Mean Mr. Mustache Man, Stalin, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong, and the rest. He admits that, right? But I'm not listening. I already know that an atheist has to say, yeah, everything's actually okay. I don't think I have an opinion it's not okay, but ultimately I can't say anything's objectively wrong. See, I'm listening for that. I already know that's the case with atheists, but they assume truth. But just listen to what he's saying. From his own position, truth itself would reduce to intuition, your sense data, your subjective experience.
I can't say that the Holocaust was good. I couldn't imagine the Holocaust being good. I think the Holocaust was wrong, and it would always be wrong because of how these people were treated and the lives that were lost.
Wow, that's really deep, Joel. Did you notice that when you fight against evil, lives are lost too? You know, if you thought it was good to stop the Yazidis and kill them, those are lost lives too, Joel. You're not a good thinker. You don't think. You feel. You're like a bitch. I think it's wrong because the lives lost. I think it's wrong because they did bad things. I think it's wrong because I think it's wrong. Who cares what you think?
Because of the human experience and the torture that was taking place there. But that's the...
Oh, I think it's wrong because I think these other things are wrong. Why are those things wrong? Because you think they're wrong. Top tier, Joel. You deserve to lose all your hair.
One evidence, which is intuition. Another evidence would be how we speak of morality, right? We say stuff like progress, right? We've progressed. We've progressed from the Bible times when they used to have...
Here, this is great. Teleology, progress, direction. This is, if we have a direction and there's an ought toward a direction, whether you think it's a world that you could imagine we should head toward, right? Or truth itself as some sort of direction toward truth, that we should head toward that. That's an atheist position, right? Well, it's going to be very hard for an atheist who has a channel and they do daily debates and stuff. And it would be very backwards for them to say, well, I've got a couple of people to admit this, but I get them to admit right off the bat that there's no purpose to what they're doing. Now, Joel would probably bite the bullet. If you called into Joel and you just said, is there any real purpose to what you're doing? He would have to say no.
Slavery. Slavery used to be ubiquitous.
Cool Boy says, I'm sorry I upset you. I wish you the best. You didn't upset me.
And
I'm just wondering. I'm still wondering what you mean by what you said.
Progressed away from that, and now we don't have slavery. So if we're progressing, where are we progressing to? And so if we can progress, then there has to be a standard that we're progressing to. We can say things like, well, it's better to not do slavery because of the, again, autonomy of human beings, and it's better for our societies if we don't enslave each other. Everybody is going to feel safer, and more people will have.
No, slaves can feel pretty safe, Joel. You're an idiot. You can definitely construct, and there has been scenarios in history where the enslaved were actually well protected. He's such an idiot.
Have a better experience and these sorts of things. There's reasons to say that slavery is not a good thing. And that's why we can say it's better now that we don't have the thing that was harmful than back then when they did have the thing that was.
No, why? No. You don't get to say that, Joel. You don't get to say that.
It's harmful.
No, you don't get to say that. What is wrong with you? You just spent like 20 minutes telling your own audience how you can't actually get to a better from a description of things. That you can't jump to a moral position that something's better. Like you can't say that it's better the same way you just argued. You can't say Radiohead song is better than Baby Shark. You can't.
It's still just going to be my and a bunch of other people's subjective stance when it comes to slavery. But we can't get away from that. Like I said, it's impossible not to be subjective. But that one also feels...
Another claim. It's impossible not to be subjective. Is that objectively true, Joel? You dimwit. I'm trying to help him. I'm trying to tell him to go full into, like, Blippy style kids programming. Not that I would want this guy teaching kids, so I mean, maybe I should take that back, but he's really bad at this. Really bad. And something that's really consistent here with atheism is that if there's good presentation and good colors, a good camera, decent voice, talent, they just don't care how bad the counter arguments are. They just don't care how bad, truly bad the worldview is. They're like, I like him. I like what he's saying. They don't think. Atheists are not thinkers, man. I just want them all to say they wish they were alive to save all of the Aztec in the past and would protect them today. Yeah, that's the other thing, Alter Void. You suddenly find all these things that you think are wrong. The question with Joel here, and any Canadian, no offense, is are you willing to potentially die or get hurt or harm others to stop the thing that you don't prefer? Do you? Will you?
A little bit like it falls under intuition. It's like there's a human intuition that there's a movement towards something better, that there's something better, and we use the language intuitively, to speak of this progress. So what ends up happening is your subjective stance or our subjective stances as humans indicate that there's an objective standard, right? So we're employing our subjectivity to prove objectivity. But why don't I grant it? For the sake of the conversation, let's grant it. Let's grant that there are objective moral values and duties. And let's grant that objective moral values do exist. So if premise one is true, that if God does not exist, then there's no objective moral values, you've just proven to me using intuition that there are objective moral values.
No. You don't prove with intuition that objective moral... Oh my gosh, dude. Cool. We just use intuition and the history of mankind to prove that God exists, Joel. I mean, he just needs a big hand mark on his pasty face.
So, therefore, God does exist. We don't know which God it is. I know that they're smuggling in the Christian God, but we don't.
Look, dude, if you're going to grant the intuition as the proof, you don't need to make an moral argument for God. You just use your intuition to say God exists. You don't need morality. I mean, this guy's a real dumb shit. Joel, you're a real dum-dum, okay? This is embarrassing. This is horrifying. This is you. You made a video. This is your video. This is you.
We don't have to smuggle in the Christian God. We can say it's a God that's going to be an objective moral standard, so maybe the God has to be good, has to be benevolent. I don't know what else the God has to be, but for the moral argument, the God would have to be the objective moral standard somehow.
I just hate it so much.